Well, hello there. If you're new around here, I'm Claire, and if you're, wow, that was a dragonfly as big as a bird. And if you're not new around here, thanks for coming to hang around. I wanted to give you guys a quick update on what is going on in the garden and to also let you guys know what I'm planning to do for the month of August. I've come around the corner because if the chickens can see me, they are quite chatty, especially the new baby chicken who is so cute, but is very needy, and thusly she squeaks all the time if she can see me. And that would be so distracting for you and me both, just like this mosquito is so distracting. Anyway, so the lovely folks over at Life on Beagle Road are doing a vlogist situation. They're gonna be putting up a video every single day in August, and I am not gonna even pretend that I can keep up with that much content. But they have totally inspired me to want to put out a whole bunch more content in August. And by a whole bunch more, I just mean like more than I did in July, because I'll be honest, I went ahead and filmed a bunch of things like garden updates, but I didn't necessarily post them because editing is like a mental block sometimes. 15 minutes of footage can easily turn into an hour's worth of editing, and when it comes to like the energy versus output ratio, I just sort of lazied out on it. Okay, I'm sorry, but I will do better this month. But I'm gonna need you guys to shout out below what kind of videos you would like me to see, because if I'm putting out all this content, I would honestly really like it if it was stuff that you found interesting. I have had a couple of folks ask me for like a life background situation kind of a video, because if you've seen me posting comments on other people's videos around YouTube, you might notice that I've talked about having pigs, growing up on a cattle farm. Somewhere along the way, I have lived on 400 acres. I have lived in an apartment with just a little bit of balcony growing space, and now I'm at a third of an acre here in a very urban setting. So I can happily do that video if you're interested. I've also heard canning, and just that vague. Guys, there's a lot when it comes to canning. Are you talking about specific recipes that you're lacking? Is it fear of canning? Is it tips and tricks for canning? Let me know below. Do you need like gardening tips and tricks? I don't know. So please let me know, because like I said, I'm gonna be making these videos and you're just gonna have to put up with whatever crappy content I put out there if you don't tell me what you want to see. I can't say that it won't be like crappy content regardless, but it'll at least be crappy content that you suggested. So that is that update. Now I'm going to show you the update in the garden. The good news about me filming all these updates and never posting them is that now I get to show you all that content back to back to back, and you don't have to wait in between videos for things to have grown and progressed and developed. You're just going to get to skip right on ahead to the end, which is where things are now. And that's pretty awesome, both for you and for me. We can just skip all the gray area in between and get right to the good stuff. And yeah, that's all I can think of for now. So off to the garden updates. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Claire, and today we're gonna be doing a garden walkthrough. It's been about 2-ish weeks since the last video that I filmed of this garden, and as promised, a lot has changed. But this morning I was drinking my coffee and watching the Dragon spaceship attached to the International Space Station, which was so cool. And I noticed that it was peaceful and all the sounds that you could really hear were mostly birds. And that's in contrast to the video that I filmed of this garden yesterday, where it was a Saturday afternoon and everyone apparently was mowing their lawns and doing lots of noisy things in the background. So I figured if I do this quick enough, I might be able to get you a new garden walkthrough today that is a little bit more peaceful and a little bit more serene. And so without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and do this garden walkthrough, and hopefully I will beat all of the neighbors waking up. Fingers crossed. Let's get to it. So I'm actually gonna be showing you guys my most recently planted things first. So I have 4 grow bags in the front with sweet potato vines being established right now, and then I also have a new bed in the front that is establishing more sweet potatoes and some dahlias, so let's check those out. These 4 grow bags that have a combination of holdouts from the fall and some newly planted sweet potato vines. So in this one we have sweet potato vines planted underneath these violas and pansies. Over here we have kale and mums, but the sweet potato vines are coming out there, and they're gonna spill over and be really pretty and decorative. I've got to cut back this chrysanthemum because it's really just one plug that has taken over this entire planter, but even so, somehow the sweet potatoes are making their way out. And in a testament to plants totally mystifying your plans or totally busting your plans. This was planted back in the fall and never really did anything, but I just liked the color. And now, if you can see down in there, it's somehow gonna head up. Or maybe it's gonna bolt, but it actually looks like it's gonna head up because it's not getting super tall. So, you know, plants will surprise you every single time. This is a bed that I have planted around a pine tree up front. And as you can see, there's lots of straw heaped up around here. And this is where I have chosen to plant some more sweet potatoes. And I also threw a couple of bargain dahlia bulbs that I got from the Tractor Supply, and they're blooming, or they're about to bloom rather. This one is basically fallen over because it got too tall, and that happens a lot of times for cut flowers. You want to stake them so they don't make these, you know, falling over type plants, but I'm not really worried about it right now. Maybe I'll stake them up, maybe I won't. I'm just impressed that they're even blooming very much, considering these were cheapy bulbs that I was kind of sure were rotted out when I bought them, and they're gonna bloom, which is really exciting. In this front garden bed, I did have some people asking me why I'm keeping these potting soil bags and plastic over here. That's basically for when these vines come over into the grass. I'm just gonna lay these down underneath the vines to sort of suppress the weeds. So that's what those are doing here. As you can see, our tomatoes have grown leaps and bounds since the last time, and thusly I have staked them. So here we have our Amish paste. Next we have our Cherokee Purple, which is doing what Cherokee Purples do a lot of the times in their first blooms, and that is creating a what's called fasciated blossom or a fused blossom. So this is nice and, you know, ginormous of a flower here in the center, and I'll probably end up pulling it off because it takes a lot of effort for a plant to make fruit that's this large ripen, and also tends to be that these combined fruits have big sections in the middle that aren't really usable, so it's not really worth it to keep these around, other than they do create some really funny cat-faced tomatoes. So if you ever see this on your plant, that's what's going on. It's just probably 3-ish blooms in this case that have fused together. But it's really exciting that it's starting to bloom and set fruit. We have our basil and our bronze fennel, which I gave a haircut since the last video, and it's just gotten even bushier ever since. A very much chewed on chocolate beauty pepper here. I picked several worms, or caterpillars rather, off of this yesterday and fed them to the chickens, and it's just sort of par for the course. If it gets really bad, I'll just spray this with BT, which is a bacteria that only affects the worms that eat your plants. So I may do that, but for now I think I'm just gonna keep hand picking them off, and it'll rebound, I'm sure. This is a Martino's Roma, and it's starting to set its buds, but it's not blooming yet. This is our sweet crispy hybrid red bell here, and this is the we don't know plant. Well, I know it's a tomato. Based off of the skinniness of the blooms, I'm gonna guess that it is potentially another paste type of tomato, but I won't really know until it starts to bloom. And of course, my for sure indicator will be what the fruit ends up looking like, but for now it's our mystery tomato. Our eggplant is getting huge, not quite as big as the ones in the other beds as far as the leaf goes, but that's not necessarily always a bad thing. It's just now getting to where our mornings are not in the, you know, cool temperatures. This morning it was about 60, so basically the warmer it gets, the more this is gonna take off. We have our purple ruffle basil here that is doing really well. I have basically been doing haircuts on all of the basils because I've been making lots of tomato sauce and meatballs and pesto and all that good stuff. So our beans are up over here, and our sunflower on the corner has had a little bit of munch damage, but otherwise is looking pretty good. And these, I have reseeded a couple here in the middle that never came up, or they got eaten, whatever the case was, but they're starting to set buds as well, if you can see that. And also this is like new leaf growth right here, and then these two on the right side are buds. So we should have some bush beans coming along fairly soon here. This is a little patch of flowers that I planted, so zinnias in the back and marigolds here. There should actually be a layer of cosmos that doesn't really seem to have come up, so I'm gonna have to reseed those. Maybe that's what this little guy is some cosmos. But this is just gonna be a little patch for pollinators to come hang out and just to add a little color. We have another sunflower here. We have our honeyboat delicata squash, which both came up. I find that not only do honeyboat delicata squash do really well in our climate, which is saying something considering we have fungus issues, powdery mildew issues, pretty much inevitably. These always germinate really quickly, which really does help them get kind of really well established before all that kicks in. Here we have our Moon and Stars watermelon, which if you can see, there's freckling on the foliage itself on this. The reason it's called a Moon and Stars watermelon is it actually gets stars, kind of looking constellation spots on the actual fruit, and the leaves do that as well. So if you're growing this type, don't worry if your leaves have yellow spots. That's actually on purpose. I might put another one next to it because melons and squashes can grow in clumps like that, but I don't know. This watermelon can get pretty big, so maybe I'll just let it have all this space by itself. I just kind of get a little paranoid that if this one gets taken out, there's no backup. Here we have our jumbo pink banana squash, and both of these also germinated, which is awesome. They're just gonna grow up and spill over. This is a winter squash that gets gigantic. It's very similar to a candy roaster pumpkin, or not candy roaster pumpkin, a candy roaster squash. It's just a really huge, sort of softer skin winter melon that's orange on the inside and so sweet and delicious. Here we have our striped blue Klondike, or striped Klondike blue. I get the blue in the wrong place every time I say it. But these are basically just sort of a standard looking striped watermelon, only it's just really good flavor. They don't get mealy. So if these both produce watermelons, I will have some whoppers. And if not, that's okay too. Marigolds here, and here need to deadhead this guy so it doesn't look quite so dreadful. But it's still blooming and looking really good too. So here we have our Dickinson pumpkin, which is a delicious eating pumpkin, but it also makes a good carving pumpkin if you want to do that. These are kind of a duskier orange color, sort of a mute color of a pumpkin. So it's really, really striking, especially compared to all those super bright orangey kind of colors that end up going on in the fall. This is another patch of flowers that I have reseeded because not a single one came up. I also meant to mention that over there I planted some more beans because those never came up either. So that's everything going on in this bed. And if we head back towards our potato bed, you might notice that the potatoes are in fact missing. I harvested 8 pounds of potatoes out of this patch, and I'm trying to decide if I want to just make this a big flower patch or I might grow something else over here. It is sort of dappled sun this time of the year, so I'm not sure what I'm going to grow here. I might even just relocate all of this dirt over where the other sweet potatoes are growing around the pine tree, just to give them a little extra dirt and nutrition, but I'm not sure yet. This is sort of my perplexed phase. And our purple potatoes are actually, I'm gonna go ahead and harvest them. We have some plants that are still alive, but as you can see, a lot of them have gone crispy. And I even noticed yesterday that I've got some purple potatoes hanging out even close to the surface, which I don't want. So I'm gonna cover those up with leaves for now, and I'll probably harvest these pretty soon. Oh, good thing to mention. If you notice over here, I've got lots of mushrooms growing. I have lots of new gardeners that ask me if it's okay to have mushrooms, like what should they do? Mushrooms are a sign of good biodiversity and ecology and life, to be simple, in your soil. So if you've got mushrooms going on, I typically don't worry about it. In fact, I think it's a good thing. And so for now, you know, I got little mushrooms there. They will probably be drying out soon because the temperatures are just so hot and it's just so dry, but don't worry if you have mushrooms. We have our tiny Tims in these corners that are setting fruit like gangbusters. They have blooms all over the place and are doing really well. As always, if I am near a tomato or pepper plant, I always tap the stems because it helps drop the pollen down and set fruit. So even if your pollinators happen to be absent, you can absolutely just help these particular self-pollinating plants out by just tapping their stems like that, and it'll help pollinate them. But I'm really excited that these are setting so well. This guy on the other side has a little bit less fruit as of right now. He does still have some over here that are setting, but as you can see, he does have a little bit of competition right now for space with this kale here. And I am just ever surprised by these chrysanthemums. I need to deadhead them, but these are just so bright and lively, and I've never had one bloom in the summertime before, but I also typically don't grow ornamental flowers. So that just makes a lot of surprises for me because I just don't know what they're gonna do. Right here we have our Golden Jenny melons, which are the little personal size cantaloupe and muskmelon. They do have a little bit of flea beetle damage, which is the speckling on them, but I think that they're gonna be just fine, so I'm not really worried about it. What is growing right here? Oh, this is our honeyboat delicata squash. Sorry, mind slip there. We have more of those coming in here and here, and as you can see, it's already starting to vine. So I'm just gonna keep pushing it towards the edge so it can spill over. Still have our kales hanging out here. These are our Texas Hill Country red okra, and they're finally taking off. All three have germinated. I think just really took really hot temperatures consistently for them to finally germinate because they don't really like cool temperatures in the evenings at all. Down here we have our Blacktail Mountain watermelons, and oh, that is Sugar Baby Bush. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember what that was, and dumb me, there's a tag behind it, but anywho, Sugar Baby Bush watermelon there. These are the Blacktail Mountain watermelons, which are bigger than a personal size, but smaller than ginormous. These are my dragon tongue bush beans that are attempting to attach to the trellis. I'm going to be putting sort of a bamboo structure over here for them to sort of latch onto. They don't really need a lot of structure, but they do send up small runners before they bloom, and so I'm gonna give them something to hold on to so they don't go somewhere that I don't really want them to hold on to. We have our Golden Jenny melons over here as well, and right now they're sort of not really close to the trellis, but they will, once they get a little bit taller, I'll be able to pull them over here, and they send out tendrils so that I can train them up this trellis, and they'll just be growing up this way, and those ones will be growing out that way. My Delicata cucumbers over here are getting nice and tall. They're sending out new leaves all the time, and they will soon be sending out tendrils. Basically, I'm anticipating, well, actually, yeah, you can sort of see there's already a tendril that is forming in this little cluster, and so it'll shoot out and grab onto the trellis, and I'll show you how my other cucumbers are already doing that. This is our blue-hilled beans, which are those purple potted pole beans I was telling you about, and the lower that you go, the more you can see the purple, but I'm panning you up, has grown all the way up here. And let me turn myself around. This is how tall I am. This is how tall this bean is. I have a selfie with this bean from last year, and it was very tall, very quick, just like this year. It also completely went off the trellis last year and made so many beans. So I'm very excited that it's doing well this year, but it still shocks me that it grows this fast. Down here we have our dark cucumbers, and as I was telling you, they're already starting to send out their tensile tendrils. Basically, they just use these tendrils to grab onto things and to be able to support themselves. And so these two are absolutely beautiful and are growing voraciously, and I cannot wait to see at what point I get cucumbers. Last year, it took, I think, the first or second week of June before I got cucumbers, and so I think I'll probably be a little bit behind that this year because I had to wait on last minute cold temperatures this year that I didn't have last year, but we'll see, because these ones might give me a run for my money. Oh, you'll notice that I do tend to put these clips on things on the trellis when they're first starting to sort of lean this way, and it helps train them towards this direction so they're grabbing on to the trellis instead of sprawling out somewhere else, and then they tend to figure it out. This one, for example, I didn't even have to train up, but this one was kind of going that way. So I gave it a little bit of advice with this clip, and it's gonna go ahead and grab on from now on, so I won't have to do any more of those. This is our Kajari melon, or really these are our Kajari melons plural because there's 2 of them. These, I'm a little bit worried that they're not gonna quite catch up and everything else around them is gonna shade them out, but we'll see. They're not really far behind, but I do always worry in this particular pocket of the garden about things that are a little bit slower growing, because it never fails, these tomatoes or these cucumbers could just totally swamp it. And I really would love some Kajari melons up my trellis this year, so we'll see. But I mean, they are still growing really well. They are putting on new growth and all that good stuff, so come on, Kajaris. This is our chocolate sprinkles tomato, and yes, it's split because we had a lot of rain that happened over the last couple of weeks. We had a couple of days in a row where it was just raining and raining and raining, but even with the splits, you can see how absolutely stunning the coloration on this tomato is. There were 2 others on here that went ahead and ripened. Oh, there's a caterpillar right before my eyes. Away. Anyway, there were 2 more on this truss of fruit, and I went ahead and ate them because they were delicious and already ripe. And this one is soon to meet the same fate. But I am just so impressed that this year this tomato is putting out just so much. It has this whole truss that is getting all ripe. We have this truss right up here that is getting bigger all the time, and I'm sure it'll start ripening soon. We have another truss right above that one that has 100% fruit set as well, and we have another truss right here that is already starting to set fruit as well, and one above it that is flowering. So if they all end up setting fruit, that is a lot of tomatoes for one plant, and I'm really excited about it because these are really delicious and gorgeous and stunning, and definitely worth my, I would say, very few spots that I reserve for small size tomatoes in my garden. We have our eggplant here, and as you can see, it's about the same size as my hand, so definitely bigger than the ones out front. They do have a little bit of flea beetle damage, so basically they start off with these little speckles with flea beetle damage, and if the beetle manages to eat all the way through the leaf, it makes those buckshot holes. And as you can see, that they have very rigid lines around the holes. That's how you know the difference between a flea beetle and caterpillars. So this is a flea beetle. It's called like buckshot damage. And then caterpillar is more like this. It has the more oblong and irregular shape. And then bird damage is more like this, where it's like a gouge hole. I don't know if you can see, like a piece of the leaf is even pulled up. That's because the bird just took a big old chunk out of that leaf. So I'm just so glad that my garden has all these examples of pest damage for me to be able to show you what it all looks like. Essentially, to treat flea beetles and caterpillars and aphids, all the same pretty much method, which will be, I typically start off with a couple of drops of soap in a cup or 2 of water. So it's like a diluted soap solution, and I'll use a paper towel to wipe down the bottom of the leaves. And then that gets rid of all the aphids that are currently on there and any eggs that are laid underneath the bottom of the leaves. And then if you have any sort of super smelly essential oils, so things like peppermint or cedar or rosemary or oregano, you can put that in a spray bottle with some water, and you can shake it up, and then you spray it on the bottoms of the leaves and the stems, and that helps repel all these things because they don't like the smell of it. And then worst comes to worst, you can use neem or diatomaceous earth. And then for caterpillars, you can use this stuff called BT, which has a crazy long name. It's like Bacillus thermoblattolilis or I'm obviously making that up. Anywho, that is good for the caterpillars that munch on the leaves, but it only works essentially as long as that solution is on the leaf. So as soon as it rains, all of those solutions I just mentioned wash off, so you have to reapply. So we have our crispy sweet hybrid bell pepper here. These are both the purple beauties, and yes, I have been pulling caterpillars off of these as well, but they don't seem to mind all that much. They're really doing very well and putting on lots and lots of flowers. So this one has its fruit like I showed you last time, and all I'm doing with these is I'm doing a little flute, a little recorder action on the stems here as well, just to make sure that they're getting good pollination, and we're gonna have a lot of cool bell peppers here soon. Back here we have our Paul Robeson, and it is setting flowers, and yes, that is a fused blossom as well. It's sort of a typical thing when you're growing an heirloom that the first couple of sets of flowers are typically gonna have some fused blossoms in it. They're just sort of working out the kinks. I've also been going through, and as you can see here, I have removed a sucker that came up in a 45-degree angle just to make sure that these stay as a single stem. And you'll see why in the other bed, why it's really, really necessary to do that. This bed has a little bit more space between the tomatoes, but I still like to keep them neat. This is our Italian heirloom, and it's blooming. Over here, it's also a fused blossom, but it has some more buds behind it. So if I end up taking this one off, there will be other flowers to set fruit. And so this one is coming along nicely, but it's really not compared to its sister over here. This Italian heirloom, which is another 6 inches higher than that one, and it's already blooming quite a lot. That's why I love to keep track of my gardens, because I would never remember that in this bed, this particular tomato is doing so much better, or, you know, is growing so much bigger if I didn't have this kind of a record. So over here we have our Italian heirloom, and weirdly enough, it's not got any fused blossoms on this particular plant. Our marigold and basil is over here, and this basil I have been picking on and picking on and picking on. It's just getting bushier and bushier, which is my favorite thing ever. So they get bigger the more that you prune them. This one is a Paul Robeson as well, and it's blooming, which is really exciting. This is just a big blossom. I don't think it's actually fused, so I'm gonna let it live. Here in the front is probably the longest tomato limb I have ever grown. I mean, if you look at it in comparison to my own arm, this is almost a 2 foot, well, it's like an 18-inch long tomato limb, which is so crazy. It definitely did not do this last year. I guess it's really happy. I don't know. But I've also been keeping it trained to a central stem, but weirdly enough, its central stem over here sort of aborted. And so it just grew a flowering cluster instead of a stem. So I'm letting this sucker actually become our new top to this plant, because it's sort of self-mutilated for whatever reason. And so this is our new stem. And if you accidentally top your tomato plant, if you let one of the suckers take over, it'll all work out in the end. So that's what we have here. I'm just gonna make sure that no more suckers grow off of this guy, because in this bed, as you can see, we cannot afford to not prune them fairly ambitiously. So after these get a little bit more established, all of these plants I'll start to kind of prune every other branch off, because otherwise it gets too thick in here and it won't have enough airflow to really stay healthy. Our Pawpaw Tomato, which is kind of in the center here, somehow ended up with 2 main branches. And so that's not ideal, but it'll be okay as long as I make sure that all this growth up here stays in check. We don't want to have any more branches come out of it, because then we'll end up with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 branches, or stems rather, off this tomato. And that'll just be too many to have to keep tying to the stake, and it'll get too thick, especially because this tomato is right in the middle of all these other ones. This is our Cherokee Purple, and it is starting to set flowers and to bloom and all that good stuff. And this is a little bit ridiculous with the amount of blooms, or buds rather, that are in this one cluster. I think I counted it's like 7 or 8 all in this one cluster. So I doubt they're all gonna set fruit, but if they do, hopefully it thickens up this stalk really well, because that's gonna be a lot of heavy fruit. Our other marigold, I try to remember to take these off, but if you don't, it's actually okay, because you end up being able to collect the seed. So each one of these inside here is a marigold seed. So you can save all these and plant them. This is the Amish paste, and it is setting little buds here, and it's kind of funny that you can really tell paste tomatoes apart because their blooms are so skinny and long comparatively. Like, for example, this is another one, paste tomato, and that's because the fruits themselves are really long, like oblong fruits, and so their blooms kind of indicate what their fruit shape is, which I think is really nifty. Down here we have another crispy, sweet hybrid red bell. Ooh, and there's a caterpillar in here, y'all. Oops, I think I just accidentally, here we go. All right, come here, little chicken. Me and these caterpillars this year, this has been the worst I've ever had for caterpillars. Last year I had just an awful time with birds and flea beetles. This year it's mostly caterpillars eating holes, but the plant seems to be okay. I mean, yeah, it's got some holes, but it'll be all right. This Gypsy sweet pepper is doing what it does every year, which is completely overwhelm me with the amount of fruit that it's setting. Both of these have set fruit and they're starting to swell. That is a pollinated flower. We have tons of blooms all over this thing, and yes, even though it seems to be setting fruit just fine, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a little tap on that stem anyway, because look, there's another one back there. These things are so prolific, and I'm so glad that I make room for it in my garden every single year. And no, this is not an ad for this pepper, but goodness gracious, if I could recommend one, it would be this one. We have another very large eggplant. I mean, this one's even bigger than the one in the other room, or the other bed. And the cool part about eggplants is that purple coloration that actually goes into the fruit is very evident on the new leaves and on the stems where the new growth is. So this cool purple velvet, which I love to pet, it's so soft, is just a really beautiful part of the eggplant before it even starts to bloom and starts to put on fruit. This oregano here, I have been eating the heck out of and adding it to meatballs and sauces and all the things. And just like the basil, the more that I prune it, the bigger it's getting. So I'm gonna have to give it a couple of significant haircuts here in a little bit, I'm sure, because otherwise, as much as I love oregano, I don't want it to completely overwhelm this entire area, and it will. Because that's just its growing habitat. It's not its fault that it's very, very good at growing. We finally have our squash and zucchini up. This is a Cocozelle zucchini, which will be a stripy yellow and green zucchini. And over there we have our scallop squash, which is also coming up. To be honest, last year I already had a scallop squash by this date. And so that just goes to show that every garden year is kind of different timing wise. Because of the cool weather, these did not germinate nearly as quickly as they did last year, and thusly the fruit is gonna be slower. And our ground cherry is now on a tomato stake because it had one of these limbs up here that were all the way over the top of this pepper and touching the gypsy pepper. So I had to sort of get it contained, but as you can see, the leaves are really nice and dark green and happy, and I think this is going to be a really good solution for this to keep it sort of a little bit more contained. Granted, I have a limb that's trying to break out over there. You're gonna have to come back in here. Come on back in. There we go.
Editing Claire here. As it turns out, our May 31st garden tour got a tad bit long. So to save us all from a 3-hour long feature-length film, I'm just pushing the rest of our update clips into their own separate video, which works out well anyway because they're all highlight reel style videos anyway, and they work well together in a much more abridged version. The remaining part of this video is just the outro from the May 31st garden tour, but it includes some fun bonus footage of my chickens playing dead that I thought you might enjoy. Please be sure and leave me a comment down below and let me know what you would like to see me posting in upcoming videos. And thank you so much for watching.
And it wouldn't be a garden tour if I didn't have a little interlude for the chickens. These two are hanging out over here, and this one's having a dust bath and playing dead chicken in the sunlight. So do you see yourself? Nope, yep, she just pecked herself. Okay, good job. So at that note, now that we're over in the chicken yard and I'm starting to sweat because it's already getting hot, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up our garden tour here. I hope that you guys are encouraged by the fact that so much can change in the 2 weeks since the last garden tour that I did, and you'll be able to notice the same in your own garden. And yeah, I hope that you will join me for our next tour, and I'll see you then. And have a good day. Bye. This is why I call it playing dead. They look like they're maimed, but now they're just hanging out in the sun. Like it's not 90 dang degrees outside. Y'all are